Okay, let's continue on. And what I was going to do today is show you one type of approach to building a static website, and that leans toward the side of JavaScript, using JavaScript to solve problems. And it's kind of a new, when you go to do something like design a site or build a site, it gets pretty big, gets complicated, and one of the jobs that you need to do is manage the complexity as it develops over time. And that's a major problem in all software development. Developing a static website is the same situation. You have to manage your complexity and figure out what tools you're going to use and so on. And so I've been working on my website for my daughter, as I told you before, and that really helps me a lot to practice and learn and do research. And I came up with an overall strategy of building a site that sort of meets with current capabilities. It doesn't satisfy all possible browsers. Like Opera Mini isn't very well supported, and Internet Explorer is a little weakly supported. Maybe the design, the site techniques that I'm thinking about possibly could satisfy something like around the order of 98% of all browsers, 95 to 98, something like that. So let me, I'm just going to start from scratch and just sort of go step by step. And so let's have this folder called site, and in here we'll create an index.html file. There's a head section. There's a body section. And we close the HTML section. So there is the organization right there. And the body section will have something in it, like hi, for instance. There's the hi. And last time I was working on a checkbox, an image that acts like a checkbox. So I didn't get to finish that yesterday. So all I'll do is implement that one right now, using the alternative design that I wanted to investigate. Yesterday we looked at this one here. This code here, we were looking at this. And this uses images for the checks. So this setup here is completely based on CSS. And my determination at this point for my preferences, the CSS is too complicated, but the JavaScript makes it a lot simpler. And if you do it in JavaScript, then you also can respond to the image click as well, whereas that's missing from this code as well. So this code would have to add JavaScript anyway at some point if it wanted to respond to checkbox events. So if we're going to do JavaScript anyway, let's use it to simplify the CSS if possible. So an image looks something like this. It's got a source attribute, and which refers to an image file. Let's see, what do we got here? flower. Flower1.jpg. So there's a flower. There's an image. So I'll start with the internal style sheet. If I wanted to resize that image, I could do it like this. I can match against all image elements in the page. And yeah, there it is. If I set the height to, if I set the height the same as the width, I'm going to get distortion. So I think I'll leave that out. I think I'll just leave that out. And now when we click on the image link, we want to replace that image with another image. So that'll show the image being in the checked state. So let's use JavaScript to do that. I'm putting the script after this element because the script is going to refer to that element. Let's see. I'm going to give this, I'll give this an ID. I'm going to call it the flower. There we go. So we get a reference to the flower if we have an ID set on the image, on the element. Then we can get a reference to the element that we can manipulate in JavaScript. And there are a number of different functions to use for that, but the simplest and the oldest is get element by ID. You simply pass in the ID here. And that get element by ID will return a reference to that element in the web page. Once we have that reference, we can call functions on it, such as add event listener. Event listener. And the event we want to listen to is the click event. It's the mouse click. And when that event happens, what we'll do is we'll toggle the flower. You know, the flower is like a checkbox. And we'll need a function for toggling the flower. There we go. So we won't do anything yet. Let's just, other than printing, we'll print a message. So the console.log toggle flower called. There we go. So there's our code. define a function toggle flower, just simply prints toggle flower called. And then we get a reference to the flower image that we created up here through that ID. I'm going to call it, I'll call it flower image. I keep the name the same, just as a convention. I think that's keep things the same, so there's it's easier to keep track like that. So the variable name that we use in our script will use the same name as the ID value. Just as it's an organizational pattern that I'm following. Now maybe I have the element ID, and I go, well, what do I refer to that element in my source code? Well, my policy is to use the same name for the variables as I do with the element ID. So, see, it makes it easier, and if you follow those kind of patterns when you start looking and editing, you don't have to, but it's just faster to find things. All right, so let's. This should be flower image also. Flower image. By changing the name, that's called refactoring, by the way. So I'm constantly refactoring all the time, constantly refactoring. Especially changing names, reorganizing, putting a function somewhere, moving one function from one class to another, so on. Lots of refactoring just to make the code more organized. So let's see if this works. So I need to reveal the console. I need to reveal this console right there. Here's the console. And this script has run. That means this toggle flower is defined. So here we added the event listener to the flower image. We registered a listener. This toggle flower function will call when the click event occurs on the flower image. Let's try it. Click. Nothing. What happened? Flower image. Document get element by ID is not a function. So it's saying that that's not a function. And that's true. This should be get. Oh, get element by ID. What the heck? All right. Reload. And I'm going to clear that and reload. Oh, there we go. Now I'll click. Hopefully it's going to say, we're inside the flower image handler or whatever. Toggle flower called. There it is. See? Now the number's going up here. 7, 8, 9, like that. So I'm going to reload this page. Keep in mind, don't forget, and I talked about this last time. See this network tab? That disabled cache, and you see that parentheses there, while DevTools is open. It's a very important setting, and that's why I'm happy to leave this window open. It's because I know that that's set. I know that I'm not looking at stale web pages when I'm doing this testing. All right, so but now there's a problem with the structure of this code. Let me show you. I'm going to reload this. Let me clear and reload. Okay. See the way we define this toggle flower? This is defined in the global namespace. That means whatever. Well, I'm sure there wasn't a toggle flower in the global namespace beforehand, but it is a good habit to not put your identifiers in the global namespace. Maybe one at the most, just like your app identifier. And it's good. It's better to keep the global namespace untouched. Let's leave that for the browser. But now let me prove to you that this is in the global namespace. Like from this prompt here, what is that? It's toggle flower. copy that. Toggle flower. See that? You see it when I wrote it down like that? You see that F there? It's giving me a little hint saying, oh, that's a function. But I didn't call it yet. So I'm going to put the syntax in there to call it. Now I hit return. It should run it. See, and it printed toggle flower called. So that's demonstrating that this toggle flower is in the global namespace. And what is it? Why does it say undefined here? What is it? Oh, that's because that's the return value from toggle flower. You know, if I did this, if I return you know, hello like that, right? That'll return, instead of saying undefined, it'll say returned. Let's check that. Reload. Toggle flower. Won't say undefined this time, it'll say hello. There it is. So when you run this from the command line, obviously it prints the return value here. But the problem is that we don't really want this function to go into the global namespace. So the standard trick is the following. We're going to put the whole thing inside of a function. See that? This whole thing goes right inside that function. And now we got to call that function. Well, this is an anonymous function. You know, if we did, so it's an anonymous function. So what we're going to do is this whole function definition here, put in parentheses, and then we're going to call it. So we define the function without a name, and then we invoke it, and that's it. So now this toggle flower function is inside of another function. Its definition is inside of another function. So it won't go into the global namespace anymore. Let's test that. I'm going to clear the console. I'm going to reload. If I click this, now if I type in toggle flower, it won't find it. See? It's not showing F there anymore. Reference error. Toggle flower is not defined. Let's see how that works. Global namespace. What if you wanted something to go into the global namespace? What if we wanted the variable x to go in the global namespace? Let me see, is x even defined? No, x is not defined. See, x is not defined. And if we, inside this function here, right? Like x is inside this function. We set it to 3. This won't come through. But if we leave it with no declaration, it'll go into the global namespace. There it is. That's the 3 right there. There's another way to put it in the global namespace, and that is the window. There's a window object, and that window object, I'm going to name this to Y, by the way, just so we get something different. The window object, there is a pre-existing window object, just like the pre-existing document object here. See, the pre-existing object we're using right there. This pre-existing window object, its attributes are considered what make up the global namespace. So if you want to put something in the global namespace, just put it as an attribute to the window object. Or if you want to see what's in the global namespace, examine the window object. That's the global namespace. Let's prove that to you there. I'm going to refresh. Well, I want to get rid of this. Why is that printing X like that? And so Y is 3. There it is. So that's the story on that. And now when we toggle the flower, we don't want to just print this message, right? That's just for development. Now let's go ahead and change this. The flower image has an SRC attribute. And it's originally set to flower 1, but we're going to change that to flower 2. Now, this flower image, it refers to this here. You know, this is not necessary, but I'm just going to do it like that because it reads a little better. So when we toggle the flower, it'll go to flower 2. Let me get rid of this. There it goes. And I think I'm gonna, those images are not the right width and height that I want. I want a square image. There it is. But I'm not clicking, I just click once and it changes, but we need to keep the state of that thing. We need to keep track of its state. So we'll do something like this. We'll let the maybe the toggled. I'll call it toggled. Toggled is false. I'll call it checked. Checked or selected. I'll call it checked. Checked is false. Flower image checked. Flower image checked. It's not checked. When we toggle the flower, we check for that flower image checked variable. If it's checked, then that means that we want to set it back to flower 1. Else, that means it's not checked. We're going to set it to flower 2. That's the initial setting. Well, we have to change that variable name. I mean, the value of flower image checked, that needs to go. Flower image checked, if it's checked, after it's checked again, then we have to set flower image checked to false. If the flower image checked is false, and then they click it, then we have to set it to true. And I'm just going to clean that up a little bit. I like to make things line up. There we go. Click, click, click. See, now it's really working there. And then I want to show this. Anybody have a Twitter feed they want to share with everybody? Or anything else I could, let me think. How to embed. Wait a minute. So I'll do it like this. Div ID equals, and this will be the, I'll call it content. And this is random content. Now maybe you have some content like this. There we go. And now let's suppose the flowers check state makes that content visible or invisible. Let's look at that. So we have another. So we'll call this the content. So we get a reference to that content div. Out here, when it's checked, this content div has a style attribute with all the different style settings for that element. Now we're going to set the display setting to none. That makes it go away. And when it's checked, the display setting will be set to block. This will make it appear. This will make the content be visible, and this will make the content invisible. And what else did I want to do? Oh yeah, I wanted to put this content, its initial state when the page loads is to not be visible. I just set it to none there. So there it goes. Let's suppose we want to put the content here. Let's put the content in here. I'm going to show you now. I'm going to just keep cranking here. It's all the stuff I've been learning recently. I got it all in my head, right? So I could just show it to you. I'm going to show you how to lay this content out using the grid feature of the CSS. Can I use grid? So it's not offered on Opera Mini. That's 1.43% of usage. And it's got partial support with Internet Explorer version 11, global usage 2%, i.e. 10, global usage 0.04%. So it looks like you need to use this prefix MS. So let me look at the partial support. It says an older version. So it looks like right in here in the comment it says it needs a MS prefix. So you could probably fix that by adding this MS prefix where you need it. So anyway, I'm not going to look at that. So we're losing these browsers, right? 1.4, 3.4, 3.5% of browser usage. We're not properly rendering to those people. All right, so basically when you have this grid, you've got to have you start with a container. And here's the grid container. I'll call it container. Here's the container. And here we'll close the container. So we have two items in the container, two children. Let's take a look at this, this container. So we refer to the container element. Oh, by the way, this image, I'm going to make that this flower image. We don't need all images to be 128 by 28, just the flower image. You'll see I'm using that hash sign there, and that number sign, whatever you call it. This is to select based on an ID value. So this, when you use this hash symbol here, and you follow it by an ID. So here's an ID set to container. So this is going to match against that ID or that element. And we're going to call this the display is of type grid. Now it generates all kinds of default settings, so we can look at it right away. And it does nothing. And let's see. I'm going to need to use I'm going to look at all, so these are all the possible properties. So we've got grid template columns. So we have you'll have two columns. The first column will be, say, 200 pixels. And the second column will be, I'm going to just say auto. I think that makes it as wide as it can be. I'll make it 400 pixels. Let's make it 400 pixels. That's the second column. I think that'll lay it out in columns right away. It doesn't. It does not work. So that is the, sorry, that's the content. It should not be the content. This is the container. Sorry about that. What does this look like with, I had that wrong. It should be container. All right, now if I bring this in, this grid template column setting, there it goes. And now I define two columns. And you could use this thing called auto. I think it'll spread everything all the way to the right. Okay. Let it get some margin in there. So what we'll do is maybe we'll take three columns. Watch this. And 200 pixels. So now we have three columns. There's nothing in the third column. But it creates a 200 pixel buffer here. So you can See, there's 3 columns and there's 1 row. So auto, this just means make it as big as you need it. So I think this is the default. This is what is generated by default. We can be explicit and just put it in there like that. Just to make sure we know what's going on, let's go ahead and put a red border around everything. 1 pixel solid red border. There it is. Right. And this shrinks a bit. Look at that. And now what I want to do is show you how this is kind of like a component that you put in your web page. I'm going to show you how to use it as a component. So we might have other things in the web page, like yeah. Let me think about that. I'm going to do it like this. It's a little different from how I was thinking, but I'm going to do it this way anyway. All right, there it is. Hello out there. And what happens if we want to give this a vertical alignment? Well, there's a way to do that. Let's see if we can get that vertical alignment. Where do they have that? Let me see. So this is the grid layout, so grid child. So you've got grid elements and then you have grid items. Let's see, you got grid items in there? No. It'd be grid cell. It's a grid cell. This would be a grid row, like that. These are grid lines. Let's see. I want to get a list of grid item attributes. There we go. I'll try this. This is one long list here. Everything down at the bottom. Let's see. That's a pretty comprehensive. So I'm not going to worry about it right now. Let's say grid auto flow column. Let's see. It's in here somewhere. I'm going to find it. Let me do it later. I want to get to the more important thing, the architecture problem. So here it is. We got this working. So now let's suppose this is it's a component of a of a bigger page, right? So we got like H1, my page. that's the container there, isn't it? We don't want it in the container. So here we have my page. And we have a container in there. And then we'll have another div and something like that. Right? You've got some page, and you've got this thing is like a component. You want to treat it like a component. Maybe you want it in multiple pages. And here's my other page. There we go. Here's my other page. But that's a link, right? But it's not linking. Let's see. href equals, gotta get that div there. There it is. All right. So in this other page, we want to have to say the same little, widget installed. Okay. So how are we going to pack this up? I'm going to show you a technique that I like to use. And I'm going to copy this thing to, I'll call it the flower.js. And now it's a JavaScript file now. And we've got this, this is the container. And so the container looks like this. Oops. And this is the checking business here. So this does the checking. And so basically we put everything in there. I'm going to get rid of that. So I commented this stuff out, that we're going to leave the CSS and the HTML in that index.html file. We're just putting that, oh, we got to get rid of these. We're just putting this, this function in there. So let's edit this index.html file. So here we are going to take this script here and load it. We'll load it using this src attribute, and it's called flower.js. So that'll run the script for us. And the script refers to, this container here. Here's the script. And no change. That's good. That still works. And now what I want to do is get rid of this, I'll get rid of that. I'm going to get rid of this the CSS. Let's get rid of this flower image and container. Let's get rid of these. All right, so we get rid of that whole style section in there. And now it's back to the way it was before, right? We don't have all that styling in there. Well, we're gonna put that in there using our JavaScript. So this is here they are right here. 1, 2. This is going to get put in here. So we have the flower image. We need a container. I don't know if we need this content. We'll just leave it there. So we have references to these 3 objects in the web page. We're going to keep track of whether the flower image is checked or not. Now, once we get this flower image, what we can do is set the CSS right inside the JavaScript. So inside JavaScript, once you have a reference to an element, you can access its styles through the style property. And then it's just, width like this. And then similar to the height. There we go. That's the flower image. What about the container image or the container div? The display should equal the grid. And then here, these styles, what you do to get these to work, these need to be uppercase. And then take out those dashes. There we go. Now, of course, you need an equal sign here. And that needs to be a string. Here's our settings for the container. And here's the display of the content is none. Like that. I better open up the JavaScript console to look for errors. No errors. And it works. So we got that working. There it is. See that? And now I'm going to go one step further here. So we have the flower JavaScript in. The flower JavaScript is starting to do everything for us. We don't need a style sheet anymore, because we do that in the JavaScript. And now what we're going to do here is I'll call this the flower div. See, and we'll pop this content in there. So what we'll do here is put that right there. So we want to get these objects. So we have a container object. We changed the name. We called it flower. Yeah, called that flower. And so this is the container. Let's call that, I'm just going to call it flower. Actually, we're not going to do it like this. This is the flower image. We're going to create an element of type image, img. And then this flower and content, we're doing away with the IDs this way as well, except for the flower ID. Oh no, the flower, I did that wrong. The flower is still in the page. So we have to use this get element ID to get the flower div. Then we create the flower image and we create the content. The content is not an image, it's a div. So we get the flower image, the flower div, the div with the ID set the flower. And then we create these HTML images, HTML elements. We create an image element, a div element, and we can add them. So the flower, you have add child, or is it a pen child? I can't remember now. A pen child. And we're going to append this flower image. And then for the content, and we'll also include the content. Now this flower image, the flower image has an src attribute, which we're going to set to, flower.jpg? Flower1, I think. And that's the initial setting. That's the initial setting. And then this stuff is still good, except that we're not calling it a container, we're calling it the flower div. So we changed the name. Container is a little too generic, so this is a component we'll include in other web pages. So we don't want to conflict with the other names. And this is the content. Here we go. And one thing I want to do about this content, where's the content? The flower image and then content. Dot style. Dot, was it insert before? How do I call insert before? Oh, it would be like content, yeah, all right. Oh, that'll be like content. So we could do append child. We could put some content in there. So it'll be new. Was it text? How to create text? We need to create a text node. Create text node in JavaScript. Create text node. Create the text node. It's called flower.js, just to remind ourselves where all this is coming from. Is it going to work? No. All right, so we put those in there. And I think we need the content div, and we have that, don't we? We have it right there. Pen child, and all right. So create the image element here. Set its width, its height, and its, is that right? It's flower1, a JPG. And then that has to be added. We never add, oh, we added it up here, append child here. And then we appended the content there. That's what we have. This is the child of flower. And then this is the content. And there we go. I think I can try doing, let me try doing this. I think it takes that. Maybe not. Maybe that's not right. Tag name. That's not right. So this is how we do it. Let me go back to this text node. Create the element, create a text node, and we append child. That's what we're doing here. We got the content, and we're calling append child. We're calling create text node. Pass it in like that, so that should be all right. And then we have this stuff, and all right, so why is the flower not visible? Oh, I know why, because this display is grid. You know, we've set the display to none. This should be content, not display. Not flower. There's the problem right there. All right, done. 503. Here we go. There it is. So everything is in everything, like all we need here is this flower div and a script where we import that flower.js. So it's like a component. We could put it in other files. So here we have our here's my other page, and this is the home page. that out. We don't need it. So we just include the same script with this div here. If we could just keep these two together right there. And yeah, right there. So then we go to the other page. We have the same component. So we could drop that component in, to whatever pages we want. So we have everything. We do everything from inside JavaScript. That's what I wanted you to see. Well, I mean, we needed to have the images separate. And but pretty much we build up a component out of JavaScript. That makes it we keep everything together in one file and make it easy to drop into, arbitrary places, arbitrary pages. So there's a lot more to talk about. I think I'll stop there. This formatting to do with the CSS, I wanted to talk about that, and some other issues, of course. So I think that's enough for today.